welcome to this episode of Zero In. I'm Alistair Drennan, Content Director at Innovation Zero. Today I'm with Dr. Hilary Leevers, Chief Executive of EngineeringUK, to talk about the importance of educating, empowering and upskilling the workforce to ensure that we have the critical labour supply for low carbon transition and the green industries of the future. We talk a lot about the financial capital required to develop energy and transport infrastructure, net zero buildings, but human capital is a major piece of the puzzle that needs to be addressed. So we're here today to talk about what's needed to deliver jobs and the green economy in turn. So welcome, Hilary. Could you just start off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Hi, and thanks ever so much for inviting me to have this conversation with you. I think it's really important. So I've been at Engineering UK for 5 years. Our organisation has just set itself a new vision, which is about making sure that the UK has the diverse workforce needed for engineering and technology to thrive, and that's in their own right, but also to drive economic prosperity, improve sustainability and achieve net zero. And we realise how fundamental that workforce is to that achievement. And then my background, I come from an education and skills background, also worked in policy before then, and before then I was a research scientist. But my first job was in engineering.
Great. So yeah, as I said at the top of this, we're going to be talking about green jobs and what skills they require. So could you just start off by giving a few examples of what these green jobs are and what kind of skills that they're going to require?
So some of the green jobs are green by virtue of the fundamental thing that they're delivering. So if you think about the massive growth in wind farms that has already occurred and needs to continue to occur, that is a really significant contributor to decarbonisation of our energy system and is a core green job. But some of the jobs on there may tap into traditional skills like welding, for example. So you may be applying traditional skills in a new sector, or you may be using new, needing to learn about new technologies. So, for example, heat pump installers, that's a new piece of technology, and people will need to be retrained. We have large needs for people in that sector, but actually it looks like we should be able to achieve that by upskilling and retraining people who are dealing with traditional boilers, as it were, or the jobs, for example, to do with electrification of transport and vehicles. Those, again, they will have a mix of traditional and new skills, but really focused on decarbonisation. But we think it's kind of quite a nuanced things. And we sort of hope that there are no jobs now in our sector that aren't thinking about how we can decarbonise as a whole. So you're always thinking about the materials that you would be using, the way in which you travel, what happens at the end of a product, and trying to build that circular economy. So actually, all jobs should be thinking about those needs and the extent to which they're specifically tailored towards it, either in terms of the skills or what they're delivering, is the bit that will vary.
And we should probably dive kind of straight into what you see as being the core challenge in terms of what is really lacking, perhaps in the workforce. I mean, I know you've delivered a number of reports over the past couple of years, which we will link in the description. But yeah, in terms of in terms of how we're developing the workforce to meet these green industries and deliver these green solutions, how far short do you feel that we're falling? And then a follow-up to that would be, what do you see as being the implications of this with us meeting our net zero targets and delivering a green economy?
going to start at the other end. So the implications, if we don't meet our workforce needs, are simply that we will not be able to hit our targets. And I think it is a genuine and very significant limiting factor that is often underestimated. So when, policy announcements are made, they will often focus about the financial investment that is needed to deliver in a particular area, without really thinking about what those skills needs are, let alone how we are going to bring them online. And, what we have at the moment is a number of estimates across all of engineering and technology, which to a greater or lesser extent will relate to green skills needs. But we have, hundreds of thousands that we know are coming down the pipeline. A couple of examples: 100,000 expected in offshore wind by 2030, 27,000 now in onshore 2030, 50,000 for heat pump engineers. These are really large numbers. They will be at all sorts of different levels, but without a really clear plan on how we're going to achieve those numbers, we're not going to achieve any of our environmental sustainability targets, let alone the net zero ones. And the limiting factors, I think, within the system, really, that we don't have good insight on what is needed as a whole. So at the moment, there are 12 or more task forces working across government, looking at the needs of their particular area, but they're not really joining up and coming up with a coherent plan. And when we look at their actions, they're often overlapping or they're dependent on recruiting the same group of people. So we need some really coherent workforce planning in order to make sure that we're going to get to meet the needs that I've conveyed. But also an education system that is kind of poised to react to those needs and ready and willing to do so. And at the moment, most of that falls to the FE, vocational and technical pathways into engineering and technology. But the HE system isn't quite as rapidly responsive to those workforce needs. I think that needs to be looked at, and much clearer messaging into schools about what those workforce needs are. And actually, if you're wanting to choose a secure career, those jobs are going to be there. They're well paid. They're average 30% above median in this area. The young people need to be primed to take the training opportunities that are there.
I mean, just further to some of those stats that you cited, I was reading some of your reports, 10,000 construction jobs per nuclear power plants, 70,000 heat pump installers by 2035, 120,000 new EV jobs by 2040. And my understanding is that at the moment, there's very little forecast clarity and data as to how those jobs are going to, where those jobs are going to come from. So you've touched upon this already, but so what are your specific recommendations for government?
And I don't want to say that nothing is happening. So there's a huge amount of activity and initiatives, and there is a Green Jobs Delivery Group, which is trying to assess these needs. But there are also many other groups trying to meet their own particular workforce needs. And what we need, the first thing that we need is a much greater understanding of the numbers, where we're using consistent definitions about the skills levels and also the areas of need, bringing those together and then actually kind of backcasting those numbers through the system so you can see how many people you need coming up at different stages in order to get to the end point that we need to achieve. And if you can do that coherently, there isn't a risk that everybody is kind of fighting over the same potential recruits into that area. And at the moment, we just don't have that coherence. So the first thing is really high quality workforce planning across engineering and technology and those critical areas for government, and then that link back into the education system and to make sure that it's properly responsive. And then we have specific recommendations in areas like the need to invest in careers education. At the moment, that's very patchy across the UK. We estimate we need about another 50 million per year to actually bring that up so that young people have consistent awareness of what jobs are available in those areas, and a really good understanding of contemporary engineering and technology role. Their perceptions are often very outdated and stereotypical about what those roles are, but also who can do them. We then need to make sure that the FE routes in particular are working really well. And there's now this new qualification, T levels, which is rolling out. There's a little bit of uncertainty because at the same time the government is consulting on other post-16 options, but the T levels are definitely here to stay and will become a part of whatever else happens post-16. But they're kind of still in a rolling out stage, and they need real industry support actually for government to solicit and incentivize that support from industry, because each one comes with a 9-week placement, and we estimate that we need 30 to 40,000 placements for young people per year in engineering, technology, digital design, construction, T levels. They're just at the level of a few thousand now. And to try and build the capacity in the time frame that we need is so important. But what you get at the end of a T level is a young person who's actually really ready to enter employment at that point. They've got great employability skills, if that's the right skill level for the employer, or they can progress into further training, including apprenticeships and universities.
And just diving a little further into the education piece, obviously a really important bit that Engineering UK talks a lot about, and I know is really important to you as well, is the importance of diversity and getting more women into STEM and engineering, and also really focusing on the ethnic disparity that there is within STEM and within engineering and these green industries. Perhaps you could just talk to that a bit more.
Yes, so we're concerned with all aspects of diversity, and we work really hard to reach groups of young people who are underrepresented in the engineering and technology workforce with our activities. We have a range of initiatives. We work with over 100,000 young people, and we're really targeting that work to make sure we include those groups. And at the same time, we work with many other organisations to support their efforts in this area. The reason why we care so much is that women in particular are still very underrepresented in the workforce. The number has improved. So we're now tracking at about 16.5% of the engineering and technology workforce are women, but that's compared to, I think it's 47.5% in the overall workforce. That's a huge mismatch. There's also underrepresentation in other areas. So it's more like 11 and 13% and 11 and 15% for people from UK minority ethnic backgrounds and people with special educational needs or disabilities. And then there's also a few percentage under in terms of socioeconomic class, so or just level of income. So there are underrepresentations across the piece, and when you look a bit deeper, most of those groups are also not well represented in more senior levels, but the greatest underrepresentation does continue to be women, and we're doing a lot to try and work out how we can improve that situation.
And something else that I read in one of your reports, which I found really interesting, was the importance of outreach in education. So there was a line that I read that those who make the link between engineering roles and environmental sustainability are 7 times more likely to be interested in engineering careers, which I thought was really fascinating. So what are some of the things that we can be doing in schools, and also how are industry and business getting involved, or how should they be getting involved? We talk a lot about sort of government and policy, but what can private enterprises and in industry be doing as well in this space?
Yeah, so you've cited one of my favourite statistics there. I know it and I talk about it a lot. And it does convey the importance of getting that message into schools. And we're running a program at the moment called the Climate Schools Program, which anyone's very welcome to come and talk to us about, see how they can get involved, which is exploring how we can embed some of those messages into the curriculum, and actually different subjects. So not just science, in geography and English, and we'll explore others as well. Because at the moment, engineering doesn't really have a presence in the school curriculum, particularly in the English school curriculum. And so you're dependent on the career system to really bring in engineering and technology. And when young people are talking about climate change, they tend to be taught about the causes of climate change and the impacts. And they naturally, in primary school, have a lot of interest in the impacts on nature, and they think a lot about recycling. But they're not really being systematically told about the engineering and technological solutions and adaptations to climate change. And again, the huge workforce needs that we have in those areas. So, when a young person is passionate about improving the environment, they might be encouraged to study, biological sciences and think about moving into conservation. I would argue that at least needs to be balanced by messaging about, oh gosh, if you really want to make a difference, well, get into green tech, and that could hold some really really serious solutions to our needs. So that outreach and that messaging is really important. I'm so sorry. I know there was another half to the question. Oh, how can industry get involved?
Yeah.
Yeah, so schools actually can really do with support from industry in getting those messages across, bringing those stories to life. We always encourage role models to be going into schools, particularly relatable roles. Models for the community of young people that they would be talking with. And they could do that through a STEM ambassador scheme that's run by STEM Learning, an organisation which I think does a great job with that. But there are many other ways of reaching out through careers fairs, other workshops, supporting with work experience. Young people want so much more STEM work experience than is available to them. So just thinking about how you could give those opportunities of a week here and there makes a real difference. And then, as I said before, that T-level offer is so needed by the education system. And I just encourage anyone to just explore, go and have a look. The DFE websites are really clear about what T-levels entail, and just start thinking about what they might be able to do. Maybe if you haven't done much with schools before, start with a few other things and to dip your feet in the water, as it were, before moving on to full level T-levels, and then apprenticeships, which are also really important.
Yeah, the apprenticeships piece, because you just published a report just recently. It was chaired by Lord Knight and Lord Willits on how to grow and sustain apprenticeships. So what were the key findings from that, or what's the sort of key message that came out of that report that you'd like people to understand when it comes to apprenticeships?
Yeah, so we've been quite concerned about apprenticeships. So apprenticeship numbers have been declining overall, but particularly in engineering and manufacturing, and particularly for 16 and 17-year-olds, and that's the lower levels of apprenticeships. And we really feel that young people should have those opportunities to enter the workforce, and not necessarily having to go through an HE route, which isn't always accessible for everyone. So we're exploring different ways in which we could increase both young people's interest in apprenticeships and the supply of the offer, which requires both industry interest and capacity within the further education system. And we had a number of recommendations. The first, it's a 5-point plan, but the first recommendation is go and read the full report, because there's a lot of detail and insight in there. But the first part of the plan is about rebalancing the education system and really thinking about what comes before an apprenticeship, because we talk so much about parity of esteem, and when we talk to employers, we can see that they really believe in the value of those vocational and technical pathways. But actually the education system, really all of the messages prior to 16 are about academic success, and you must get your good grades. The school performance measures are very academically oriented, and the idea that you can suddenly switch to saying, oh, and now it's just as good to go down a very different sort broader pathway seems anomalous. We think there's a lot more you can do to interest people in that pathway pre-16 and to change the way in which it's communicated about. And then there was the second area is about supporting young people. We know there are some barriers to their participation, which may be about the functional skills requirements, but it may be some really practical things. They're not in well-paid employment and they're not students, so they don't have access to student discounts. They often have very expensive transport costs. If their family receives child benefit, they will lose that if they become an apprentice. So there are just some tweaks in the system that would make it more accessible. And then we also wanted to look at how we can make sure that the 16 to 17 and lower levels were supported through the funding system. It's about refocusing the funding to that area, supporting businesses with their ability to offer apprenticeships. And we made some suggestions there, particularly for SMEs, which can find it quite hard to have more support around that. And just to help employers take action, but also encouraging them to offer those places, and also to look at whether they can support the training providers, because we need to build capacity in that system as well. And maybe there are ways that industries could help with equipment or with training some of the training providers, or even releasing some of their staff to support with training.
That's really, really fascinating. Yeah, just to looking forward to your participation at Innovation Zero. So you're going to be talking in our energy forum, talking all about scaling the energy transition, where obviously you'll be touching upon a lot of these things. So we'll have a couple of panelists talking obviously from the funding perspective and the new financing models that are required to scale innovations and scale businesses sufficiently so that their solutions reach mass market. But I'm really, really pleased that you'll be on this panel as well to talk exactly about this. It's right. I was really, really keen to have you involved, and obviously to have this interview as well, because it's such an important piece. And I'm really, really pleased that we've been able to have this discussion and get this message out there. So yeah, to everyone watching, please do come to that session. But one thing the one thing that I wanted to ask as my sort of closing question, really, with regards to Innovation Zero, is with everybody who's going to be coming to Innovation Zero, who do you really want to be meeting there, and sort of what are the kind of conversations that you want to be having in order for your messages and for your outcomes to really turn into tangible realities? Who do you want to meet in order to sort of really make this happen? What are the sort of conversations that do you want? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, who do you want to meet?
Great question.
And yeah, how can we sort of make that happen, really?
Number one, I will talk to anyone. Please come and find me. I would really like to talk to policymakers about what we're seeing at the gaps in that skills planning system and some of those solutions that we're proposing. We're really here to support a lot of the commitments that have been made or might be made by the next government, but actually to make sure that they can become a reality, because at the moment we're not quite seeing that's a secure and sure thing. And then industry, anybody from industry who would like a bit of support with their thinking about how to engage with their future employees, how to improve the diversity of their intake. And if they wanted, pointers to, we've got a lot of stats about how those skills are changing, what we anticipate as future workforce trends to support their planning. But particularly if they're wanting to work with schools, please come find us. You can look at Engineering UK online, but we also run the Tomorrow's Engineers Code, where we bring together over 300 organisations. It's free to join, and we're a charity, but we have some core funding that we put towards this kind of greater good effort, just to help any organisation that is trying to excite young people about engineering and technology careers. We've got loads of advice and support and resources available to them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And we really look forward to seeing you Innovation Zero. So yeah, please do come to Hilary's session on the 30th of April in our Energy Forum, Scaling the Green Energy Transition. And yeah, can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alistair.
Take care.